has always experienced wildfire due to our summer dry climate and periodic droughts. In the past 10 years, however, the size and intensity of wildfires in Sonoma County have increased significantly. How to reduce fire fuels depends on the type of vegetation to be treated. This video discusses the grassland environment and how livestock grazing can be used to reduce fuel loads. The Nuns Canyon fire in Sonoma Valley burned 56,566 acres and was one of the fires that burned in Sonoma County in 2017.
Grassland fires will burn intensely, but they will burn more rapidly. They don't have the same fuel load, so fire will move across a grassland typically much quicker than it will in a chaparral type environment or brush environment, but grass doesn't have the same fuel load, so the speed is there, but the intensity is not.
I oversee my family's property. It's about 450 acres, and we have a vineyard and cattle grazing operation. We were pretty much ground zero for the Nuns Canyon fire. The property was pretty leveled. We lost all infrastructure, wells, power, piping, water tanks, and probably our biggest loss was fencing, which you don't really think about until you can't have your animals on the land or you're trying to prevent deer from getting into the vineyard. It was a mad dash post-fire to get infrastructure back and cleanup. After the fires, the cattle went off-site, so we were really wanting to bring them back because they are our biggest workhorse in terms of keeping our fuel load down. That's huge for us, keeping our pasture lands grazed. It's definitely a clean all summer and control burns during the winter, and then spring you're starting to think about your next phase of cleaning up. I would say our biggest takeaway is being vigilant about our land, constantly present. It's been good to get to know everyone and our neighbors and work together to get it done. We've all learned together.
Most of the time, the risk of fire ignition and spread in a grassland is from about May until October. When do you want to have grazing in order to reduce the fire hazards? Well, it could be, for example, that you want to have grazing during the wet season that precedes the fire season in the winter and spring. That would complicate things for a cow-calf operator who might want to have a bunch of cows that are producing calves every year that then can get sold. But other kinds of operations are stocker operations where you bring in some young calves that are going to grow and put weight on and then be taken off the property. Cattle generally eat grasses. Sheep eat grasses and some forbs, we call it. Those are non-grass plants. And then goats work on woody plants. If it's cattle, you're going to need some pretty heavy fences. With sheep and goats, a lot of operators will use electric fencing. And so you might not even need to have some kind of permanent heavy-duty fencing if you're going to use goats and sheep. Watering, similarly, for cattle, you've got to have these big heavy-duty troughs. You've got to have a lot of water. They can use up to 20 gallons a day per animal. With goats and sheep, often the watering system is brought in with the operator in a trailer behind a truck, and then that water is fed into a trough that's inside the enclosed pen. I always recommend that a property owner go down to the fire department or call them up on the phone and say, hey, is there somebody who could come out and take a look with me on my property to determine where are my risk zones? Where could I expect a fire to sweep through my property from? And then where would it go? And what are the places where I should concentrate grazing? The least cost type of grazing to achieve almost all goals that you might have on California rangelands can be done with cattle. Cattle often generate income for the landowner, whereas I mentioned sheep and goats usually charge a lot, up to $1,000 or $2,000 per acre per treatment. Cattle can protect themselves from predators. Sheep and goats require a shepherd pretty much 24 hours a day.
We use grazing for specific purposes. So for example, at Calabasas, we had a 60-acre grassland that had quite a bit of yellow star thistle. So the purpose of that grazing project was to get the correct animals at the correct time at the preserve to manage the yellow star thistle. In a remote setting, it can be very complicated. It had been grazed, but not at that intensity because we had 200 to 250 animals for just a few weeks versus 20 cattle for the whole year.
Managing land to reduce fire fuels in Sonoma County is now a necessity. If you're a grassland owner, we strongly encourage you to learn about grazing or other ways to reduce your hazards. We'd like to acknowledge the agencies that provided the funding for these videos, the California Department of Food and Agriculture and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. If you would like to learn more on these subjects, please visit our website.